So given what we know about expectations, it's really important to use more objective markers. That keeps us from letting our views on race and other dynamics influence how and when we perceive reading struggles, which will then determine the speed at which appropriate interventions are applied. We recently shared this definition of dyslexia, that it was really a gap between a person's intelligence and reading ability. We shared it, and a grandmother in the community yelled out, "That's everybody." Literally, she said her worldview was that kids can learn, and so she perceived it to be, obvious. But dyslexia is actually a neurobiological condition. It's in the brain. What the grandmother has to understand is that when we don't provide kids with effective instruction, using a structured literacy approach, for example, the kid may appear to have dyslexia. So the looks and sounds very similar. But again, one is a neurobiological learning difference, while the other is a difference where we just haven't given the brain what it needs. The child is in an unfortunate, the child is an unfortunate casualty, really, of the reading wars. But in terms of how it impacts the lives of the kids and the families and the communities, as we say in my community, it's the same difference. And you might wonder why we all aren't using a structured literacy approach. I mean, at this point, very few people, given the amount of evidence, would still suggest that we don't need all 5 of those pillars. Even curriculum publishers, like I said, are going back and reworking things, adding supplemental pieces to cover their bases. I mean, we can discuss at a different time, the approach, the Band-Aid approach to fixing curriculum that's already in circulation versus starting with something that was designed from the very beginning to be whole. But still, why is there such dissonance with this? The opening of the ACP, as part of our focus on reading, has really worked to understand this. And we've come to realize that the perceptions listed here are widespread. So when you think about structured literacy, you can see those that are listed. These narratives are common. There was a time when only 40% of students really needed to be good readers to fuel our economy. But in this age, this information age that we're living in, everything's changed. It's a whole new dynamic. The need is different. And so a huge elephant in the room is the impact of expectations on student achievement, which is what Hattie was alluding to, and how American integration occurred without adequately addressing our societal views of students, what they can learn, and the impact that we as adults can have. So 2 quick notes. We find the idea, or the common refrain, is that there is no singular approach. We take that to be a red herring, because that statement misses the point that public education should be afforded to all. What's more accurate to say is there's no single approach needed for about 40% of the students. So structured literacy isn't always important, not for that group. However, we need to be clear about the goal. If the goal is to support the highest percentage of students, then we need to apply what we know. As for structured literacy pushing out the high-income families, here's a news flash. Wealthy parents have kids that struggle to read too. However, what the school does not do, the parents provide. They get the tutors, the aides, the medical specialists, the educational lawyers to get kids what they need. So in many ways, our achievement gap is a function of, different communities' financial capacity to deal with the impact of what is and isn't being provided to their children in school. And then the perception that these non-readers are bottom dwellers or ne'er-do-wells. They have to, educators would have to teach to the lowest kid or dumb things down, or that this is something only for poor Black students. It's just false. It really is. This hits everybody, which is what that slide will show you when you look at it later on when we send it out to you. It hits everybody the same. In fact, to counter that narrative, here's a list of, good old-fashioned white male dyslexics. Why white men, you say? Because, you know, we need to shift the thinking about who needs this. Dyslexia specifically, and low reading in general, is not a sign of low intelligence. In fact, dyslexia is actually affectionately called the MIT disease, because so many MIT researchers have it. You know, they're only 20% of the population, but they're 43% of the self-made millionaires, and over 50% of your NASA scientists. But they're also overrepresented in our prison population, where up to 80% of the inmates are functionally illiterate, and a majority of those are dyslexic. So they can go either way. But by unquestioningly accepting the dogma of the day, we're feeding the wrong wolf, so to speak, and failing to develop our most gifted students, or those who are gifted in a different way. We're squandering their genius, and we're jeopardizing the fiscal health of our institutions by sending kids to special ed who shouldn't be there. Structured literacy in the core classroom and combined with early screening for dyslexia allows us to intervene much sooner. It helps us to provide the level of text complexity necessary for students to become college and career ready. We have to identify the root cause and intervene in a timely way, not use poor student outcomes to give oxygen to unhealthy views about students and what they're capable of.